Woohoo! Party time! Party time! Today's project, how to prepare the perfect joint. You can see I have my supplies and I am ready to go. What? Not that kind of joint? Oh. Excuse me. I was told this is a serious presentation, so I don't know what happened before this, but I am a fine, upstanding person, so come on guys, be cool, no cops. Of course, what we're going to be doing is working on a jig that will be able to joint edges of a board without a joiner. Like many of you, I do not have a jointer, so I have to use my table saw to get a flat edge on a board. And in this project, I'll be showing you how to build this jig for it. It's pretty easy. I did it all with scrap wood. It works great, and let's get started. The first thing I did was I found some scrap melamine board in my garage. It's 1 inch thick, a little thicker than I wanted, but hey, it's what I had. The first thing I did was I ripped it down to about 13 or 14 inches. Really, it doesn't matter how big it is at this point because we're going to be trimming it down to a 0 clearance cut anyways. My sled is 50 inches long. I wanted my sled to be at least 48 inches, so 50 inches works great. The next thing I need to do is cut a 50-inch piece of wood, scrap wood that I found. I don't know what kind of wood this is, for my runner inside of my miter slot. My miter slot is 5/8 of an inch wide. So my first rip cut on this runner is at 3/4. I made it big on purpose so that I could ease up on it so that I could get a perfect snug fit in my miter slot. Next, I made a series of rip cuts where I just very, very gradually snuck up on the correct width to snugly fit into my miter slot so that I wouldn't have any wiggle. I actually made about maybe 3 passes just shaving off a little at a time. You can see I have it cut at a perfect fit right now. It fits snug, slides nice, and has really 0 wiggle in it at all. Just what we're looking for. Next, we simply measure the depth of the miter slot. Next, we transfer that mark over to our runner that we cut and run it through the table saw again. We want to make sure though that when we cut this, we cut it so that it's going to be not quite as deep as the miter slot. We don't want the bottom of the runner to hit the bottom of the miter slot. Maybe 1/8 of an inch less should do it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure from this front side of the miter slot all the way to this edge and probably add about 1/4 of an inch just so it'll overhang. And by the way, I do have my saw unplugged right now because I am not going to go near this blade with it plugged in. So again, I'm going to measure from this side of the slot to this side plus about 1/4 of an inch or so, just to give me plenty of room so that when I come back I can go ahead and run it through and get a 0 clearance cut. I'm going to measure it from this side as well as this side just to make sure that I'm getting a good cut. So this shows that it's basically right at 5 inches. It's 4 15/16, and same on that side. So I'm just going to go about 5 1/4. So now I'm going to mark 5 1/4 inches on this side, 5 1/4 inches on this side. That's the edge that I'm going to glue and nail this down to. And I know that that'll line up right in the slot. At this point, we really don't need it to be square with this. That's the nice thing about it, is Once I get it on, yeah, I'm going to want to probably get it as flush and square as I can get it. But once I run it through the saw and I get a zero clearance cut, it will always cut there every single time. I think that'll make more sense after I get this done and show you. But at this point right now, I just want to get it as square as I can, but it really doesn't matter that it's perfectly square. So at this point, what I need to do is I need to glue this down. I'm going to also tack it with 1-inch brad nails. This melamine board is 1 inch. It's actually very heavy, and I'm not quite sure how that's going to actually work in the long run because it's pretty heavy. I may come back and actually redo this with 1/4 inch or 3/4 inch plywood, but we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it works. But right now it does feel kind of heavy. So I'm just going to put a bead of glue. And the glue is what's really going to hold it. But I'm going to go ahead and staple it so it'll hold it in place as the glue dries. Next, I cut 2 pieces of 2x4 at about 12 to 13 inches in length. Length really doesn't matter too much at this point. You want it to be able to span basically the width of your sled. Now we rip the 2x4s in half so that we'll have 4 pieces that will become the handles or the clamps of the sled. Next, we sketch very rough shapes for what we want our clamp to be. Basically one side that's going to clamp on to the board that we're going to be jointing, and the other that will stay snug and secure to the sled. We're not trying to win any art contests here, just tracing out some basic shapes for clamps. I don't have a bandsaw, but I do have a scroll saw, so I use that to cut on the traced lines that I put on the 2x4s that will become my hold downs for the sled. I truly apologize for this horrible camera angle. Again, no real measuring needed, but I drill a 3/8 inch hole about 1/3 away up from the back of each clamp. I use a 3/8 inch bit because I'm going to be using a 1/4 inch bit to actually clamp them down, and because each clamp won't be coming down exactly straight each time, it'll give it a little bit of playroom so that it can tilt one way or the other. You'll see this better once it's completed. Next, I turn the sled upside down. I put the clamps on the sled where they'll go. I simply mark the sled where I will need to drill the holes. Next, I use a 1/2 inch Forstner bit to countersink each of the holes on the bottom of the sled. This will allow the bolt head to be countersunk nicely into the sled so that it won't scratch as we run it over the table saw top. Again, to give the 1/4 inch bolt we'll be using some play, we use a 5/8 inch bit to center up the hole and drill the rest of the way through the sled. Now to create knobs for the clamp so that we can tighten them down, I rip a 2-inch piece of scrap wood and then I cross-cut it into 2-inch squares. Each one will be the knob for each of the clamps to screw down nice and tight on the wood that we are jointing. Next, we can use a straight edge, marking corner to corner, so that we can mark the center of each knob where we'll need to drill a hole. Next, I use a 5/16 inch drill bit and drill the holes in the center of each knob. 5/16 inch drill bit is because that's what's called for the T-nuts that I'm using. The edges of the knobs were a bit sharp, so I clamped my belt sander to my bench and just use that to soften them up a little bit. Next, I insert the T-nuts into the knob holes, and sometimes you just got to use a little motivation to get things done. last step is attaching all the clamps to the sled. I do this by running the 1/4-inch bolt up through the bottom, through the clamp, a fender washer, and then the knobs. I do this for all 4 clamps. I apologize, but I was having camera issues and did not record the zero clearance rip cut on the sled. All you do is insert the sled into the miter joint and run it through. That creates a perfect edge that will go right up to the blade. Now for testing, all I do is grab a scrap piece of wood, clamp it in so that it just overhangs the edge of the sled, and run it through. So there you have it. I now have a way to put flat edges and joint to the edges of wood, and you can see this makes a really, I don't see any light coming through there at all, so that's extremely flat. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it is, I don't see anything coming through. It looks perfect. So now all I would have to do, put the flat edge up against the fence, run it through. I then have a flat edge on both sides, parallel, ready to join together. I really like this. This is really a nice smooth edge. Again, I do have my table saw unplugged right now. You notice that I have the guard off for the last several cuts. The riving knife on my guard, it's guard and riving knife in one. It just hooks on back here. I guess it got bent or something, and I wasn't able to completely push my wood through it. It kept hitting it. So I took my guard off, and I'll look at that later. I'll figure out what's going on. Believe me, I was very worried every time I was cutting with this guard off. I told you before in earlier videos that I really don't like not using the guard if I can get away with it. I know it makes it easier for you to see the cuts this way, but I did get some stitches here on a few years ago on doing something stupid and cutting my thumb. And I don't want that to happen. I guess the good thing is when I have that off, I am so conscious of this tool that I am just taking every precaution, fingers not getting anywhere near it, just really being aware of what this tool can do. But that's why I have it off. I'll get it fixed and get it back on for the next video, hopefully. If you like this, please subscribe. Hit the like button. If you've got any questions or comments, go ahead and put them in the comments. I'll get back to you. But again, this really made for a very smooth and straight finish. And again, there's thousands of these out on YouTube. I basically looked at a couple, maybe 5 or 6 out there, kind of combined several of them together to get my design. Pushing this through, it did get a little bit sticky, so I think I've got to shave off a little bit more on the runner in a couple of areas, and I'll wax the bottom of it also to help it run smoother. This is pretty heavy. It's 1 inch. It is pretty heavy, and I'm still not sure if I'm going to redo this with 3/4 inch plywood or not, but I'm going to go ahead and use it for a bit and just see how it works, especially after I wax the bottom and as well as shave off a couple spots that are sticking. But let me know what you think. See you next time, guys. Hey guys, I just wanted to do an update on this. I did wax the bottom of the sled as well as the sides of the runners. I also waxed the top of the table saw, and I have to say it makes a huge difference. This thing flows so easy now. The weight of it is not a problem. It's like a knife through butter. I had no idea that waxing the bottom would make such a big difference, but it really did.